paradrama tales.
He held my hand. The night before our wedding, looked me in the eye and said he couldn't wait to marry me. Less than 12 hours later, I found out he was still in love with someone else. And that someone wasn't me. It was his best friend. A man he never stopped loving. We were never the traditional couple. No church aisle, no bachelorette party, no rigid rules. We didn't believe in doing things just because that's how it's always been done. And honestly, that's what made me feel safe with him. Like we were building something that was ours, not a copy of someone else's story. He told me he was bisexual the very first year we started dating. It wasn't a dramatic confession, just a part of who he was, and I respected that. I loved him for his honesty, his sensitivity, his openness. He never made me feel second best, never gave me a reason to doubt his commitment. And then there was his best friend, let's call him Evan. They'd grown up together, gone to the same college, lived in the same dorm, pulled all-nighters during finals. I used to joke that they were basically soulmates until the joke stopped being funny. But back then it didn't bother me. If anything, I admired how close they were. Their friendship felt rare and deep. He never hid Evan from me. We went on double dates. We planned group trips. Evan helped him pick out my engagement ring. He was at our house all the time, eating dinner with us, making us laugh, hugging us both goodbye. Looking back now, the signs were subtle, but they were there. Lingering glances, late-night texts that weren't always explained. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. But when you're in love, you give the benefit of the doubt. You trust, you want to trust. And I did. When we decided to spend the night before our wedding together, just the two of us, I remember thinking, this is what real love looks like. Honest, vulnerable hours. No separation before the big day. No show for the cameras. Just him and me. I didn't know that night would be the last time I believed we were alone in our relationship. The night before the wedding, we didn't sleep apart like most couples do. That was never our thing. We wanted to end our dating life the way we lived it together, side by side. So we ordered takeout, sat on the living room floor in sweatpants, and spent hours laughing, reminiscing, and imagining our future. He told me how nervous he'd been the first time we met. I teased him about the ugly shirt he wore on our third date. We went through old photos, talked about baby names we might use someday, and said out loud what we thought our vows might sound like. Not rehearsed, just real. It was the kind of night you want to bottle up and save for when life gets hard. I remember looking at him and thinking, I'm so lucky. Not because he was perfect, but because he was honest. That's what I believed. He had flaws, sure, but he was mine, and he chose me, and I thought that meant something unshakable. He kissed me goodnight like he always did. 3 soft kisses, one on the forehead, one on the cheek, one on the lips. Tomorrow, he whispered, I get to call you my wife. I fell asleep with my hand in his heart, full mind, calm, no alarms, no doubts, no sign that the world I'd built in my head, this love, this future, this wedding, was already beginning to quietly collapse behind my back. It's wild, isn't it? How peace can wrap around you like a blanket. Right before the storm. I don't even remember what made me suspicious at first. Maybe it was something small like the way he lingered around Evan at the rehearsal dinner, or how Evan looked a little too sad for a man supposedly celebrating his best friend's big day. But somewhere between dessert and midnight, a knot started forming in my stomach. One I couldn't untie. I asked him, my fiancé, if anything had ever happened between them, between him and Evan. His face changed instantly. He didn't lie. He didn't even hesitate. He just looked at me and said, there were a few slip-ups. He said it like he'd dropped a glass or missed a turn on the highway. Not like he'd slept with someone while we were together. Not like he'd betrayed the foundation of what I thought was an honest, transparent love. I asked him if he still loved Evan. Silence. Then quietly, I don't know. He tried to follow it up with, I love you too, but by then it didn't matter. That too said it all. I wasn't the only one in his heart. And maybe I never had been. Later that night I called Evan. I needed answers, needed someone to confirm or deny what I now feared was true. He paused. He stammered, tried to laugh it off. But when I asked again, do you love him? He just sighed and said, yeah, I guess I always have. That was it. That's when everything broke. Not because they were both men, but because I was supposed to be the only person standing at the altar with him. And instead, I was the placeholder for the one he never stopped loving. I woke up early the morning of my wedding, not with excitement, not with butterflies, but with a sinking feeling in my chest I couldn't ignore. My stomach churned, my thoughts spun. The room felt too quiet, too heavy. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, knowing deep down I was about to make a decision that would change everything. The dress hung by the window, sunlight dancing off its lace details. My phone buzzed with messages my mom, my friends' reminders from the florist makeup artist caterer, all preparing for a celebration I knew in my heart I could no longer go through with. Everyone expected me to smile to walk the aisle to say I do. But how could I promise forever to someone who had already given part of himself to someone else I didn't tell anyone at first? I got dressed in silence, took a slow walk outside, and then I made the call to the venue, the officiant, and finally, to him. When he picked up, I said it simply, "I can't marry you today." He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just sighed like maybe part of him had known this was coming all along. Maybe he had hoped I'd go through with it anyway. But I couldn't. Not because I didn't love him. I did, still do in some strange, aching way. But love doesn't survive without trust, without exclusivity, not just of body, but of heart. So I called off the wedding. No dress, no vows, no rings. Just silence, tears, and the strange relief of knowing I had chosen myself. Because sometimes the bravest thing a bride can do is walk away before the music starts. You'd think canceling a wedding would come with sympathy, a little understanding, maybe even quiet support. Instead, I was met with confusion, frustration, and guilt from all directions. My mom was the first to call, sobbing, "Honey, what happened? People are already on the way. You can't just call it off." My dad was more silent, disappointed in a way that didn't need words. His silence said, "Why didn't you just go through with it?" Like marriage was a performance I should have finished for the sake of the audience. His family, on the other hand, wasn't silent at all. I was accused of being dramatic, selfish, inconsiderate. They told me I should have known what I was getting into, like my heartbreak was just the price of loving someone bisexual. As if that was the betrayal, as if the problem wasn't the lies, but my refusal to quietly accept them. Our mutual friends sent mixed messages. Some said they understood. Others asked me to reconsider. "Don't throw away 5 years over one mistake," one said. "He chose you in the end," another insisted. But that's the thing, he didn't. If someone's heart still belongs elsewhere, even just a sliver of it, then you're never really chosen. You're tolerated. You're convenient. And I refused to build a lifetime on that. What hurt most wasn't losing the wedding. It was realizing how many people would have rather seen me marry a half-present partner than stand alone in my truth. Disappointing others is one of the hardest parts of doing what's right for yourself. And yet, in that whirlwind of opinions, missed deposits, and returned gifts, I found something quiet but powerful, a new kind of clarity. Sometimes walking away doesn't just cost you a wedding. It costs you who people expected you to be. But it gives you back who you were meant to become. People assume heartbreak comes after a marriage falls apart, divorce papers, custody battles, years of resentment. But I learned something different. Heartbreak doesn't need an altar. It doesn't need a dress or vows or a packed room of witnesses. It can happen in silence, in a moment, in the quiet click of a phone call canceling a florist. Because I didn't just lose a partner that day, I lost a future, a version of my life I had built in my head, with love, hope, and the kind of blind trust you only give once. The first few nights were the hardest. The bed was still half made on his side. My apartment still had the color palette we chose together. The music playlists we curated for the wedding, I couldn't listen to a single note. I cried brushing my teeth, cried doing dishes, cried folding the hoodie he left behind. There was no ceremony, no reception, no final dance, but it still felt like a funeral, and the worst part, there was no one to be angry at. Not really, because I didn't hate him. I hated what he didn't tell me. I hated the lies of omission, the soft betrayal wrapped in warmth and habit. But I didn't hate him, and that made it harder. There were no guests to console me. No one clinking glasses with gentle toasts of encouragement. Just me, a quiet house, and the echo of what almost was. Heartbreak doesn't follow a calendar. It doesn't wait for the wedding date. It arrives when trust breaks, when love feels lopsided, and when you realize the person you were willing to give everything to had already given parts of themselves to someone else. So, no, I didn't walk down the aisle. But don't think for a second that my heart didn't shatter just the same. One of the hardest things I had to deal with after calling off the wedding was how quickly people tried to turn this into a conversation about sexuality. They'd say, "Well, you knew he was bi, right?" As if knowing who he was attracted to made it okay for him to betray me. But here's the truth. Cheating isn't about gender. It's not about whether it was a man or a woman. It's about honesty. It's about loyalty. It's about the promises we make when we say we're committed and the choices we make when we think no one is watching. He didn't cheat because he was bisexual. He cheated because he had feelings he didn't deal with, emotions he never told me about. He chose silence over transparency, familiarity over courage, comfort over accountability. And when people say, well, he still chose you, no, he didn't. Because choosing someone isn't just about showing up to the altar. It's about showing up in every conversation, every conflict, every hard truth. It's about saying, here's everything, the messy stuff too. I never asked him to erase his past. I never expected him to forget who he was. But I did expect him to be honest about where his heart really lived. And if even part of it still belonged to someone else, he owed me that truth before we ordered the cake, not after. Love can survive almost anything, but not lies dressed up as protection. Not secrets labeled as not a big deal. So, no, I didn't lose him because he was attracted to men. I lost him because he wasn't brave enough to tell me that I was never the only one in the room. People love to say things like, I don't know if I could have walked away like you did. But they say it like it was easy, like it was some kind of empowered movie moment, me in a dramatic dress standing tall and fierce. It wasn't. Leaving hurt like hell. It hurt because I still loved him. Because a piece of me wanted to pretend it never happened, to push through the day, say I do, and figure it out later. It hurt because I'd already imagined the photos, the first dance, the honeymoon laughter. I wanted that story. I wanted that life. But more than wanting a wedding, I wanted a marriage built on truth. And I knew deep in my gut, in the quietest part of me, that if I married him that day, I'd be stepping into something cracked from the start. I'd spend our years wondering if he was really with me or still emotionally somewhere else. I'd question every late night, every text from Evan, every silence. So, no, leaving wasn't easy, but it was mine to make. And for the first time in a long time, I made a decision that wasn't about keeping the peace or making others happy. I chose me. I chose the woman who deserved to be chosen fully, who deserved a partner that didn't hesitate, who deserved a love that wasn't shared in secret with someone else. It didn't feel like strength in the moment. It felt like grief. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away quietly from the person you once pictured forever with, because you finally realize that your forever starts with truth, not compromise. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is disappoint everyone else just to stay true to yourself. I didn't leave because I stopped loving him. I left because I started loving myself more. Because I realized that a wedding built on half-truths would only lead to a marriage full of doubt. And I didn't want a life where I'd always wonder if I was someone's second choice. Heartbreak isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper in the early morning that tells you, this isn't right. And when you listen to that whisper, you give yourself something far more sacred than a wedding ring. You give yourself freedom. You give yourself peace. If you're watching this, and you've ever stood at a crossroad between what's easy and what's honest, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not weak for walking away. You're not cold for choosing clarity over comfort. You are brave, and you are allowed to start over. And if this story touched something in, you hit that subscribe button. Because out here we don't just tell stories. We speak truth, we honor pain, and we hold space for the people who choose self-respect, even when it costs them everything else. You deserve more than almost. You deserve whole.